Frozen hearts in Ushuaia, Jungkook and Jimin's secret touch snowflake #beating heart don't move. The words cut through the biting wind like a jagged shard of ice. Jungkook's breath fogged the frigid air as he pressed his back against the slick metal of the abandoned research station, every muscle tensed, every nerve screaming with anticipation. The howling Patagonian wind carried the faint whistle of the storm outside, rattling the fragile window panes, and somewhere in the distance, the creak of ice shifting under pressure made his stomach tighten. Jimin's hand found his unexpectedly, gripping him not with force but with the silent insistence of intimacy that Jungkook hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. His touch was both an anchor and a spark, sending a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. Jungkook swallowed hard, eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor ahead. Shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, distorted by the flickering emergency lights. Every step forward felt like a betrayal of reason, yet an undeniable pull dragged him toward Jimin. "Are you sure about this?" Jungkook whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of uncertainty. Jimin's gaze didn't waver. His amber eyes, normally warm, glinted with a steely resolve sharpened by fear and longing alike. "I'm sure," he said simply, and in that moment, the storm outside seemed to fall silent, as if the universe itself held its breath. They were here for more than just a location shoot for their special episode. Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world, was supposed to be breathtaking, a serene, frozen paradise, but it hid a labyrinth of secrets beneath its icy veneer. The production crew had left them alone for what they thought was a routine scouting of the snow-covered cliffs. What they didn't know was that someone, or something, had followed. Jungkook's heart pounded against his ribcage as memories flickered in his mind. The near accident during their last performance tour, the whispered threats he had shrugged off, the shadows that lingered longer than they should. He had always been the cautious one, the one who measured danger and weighed every move, yet here, with Jimin's hand warm against his, every instinct screamed to surrender to the uncertainty. "I hate feeling helpless," Jungkook muttered, voice low, almost drowned by the gusting wind outside. Jimin's fingers tightened around his. "Then don't," he replied softly, his breath brushing Jungkook's cheek. The closeness was electric, a volatile mix of fear, adrenaline, and something neither wanted to name aloud. The floorboards creaked beneath their boots as they moved forward, each step a careful negotiation with the ice-laden hallway. Jungkook's eyes caught a glint, a reflection from a small device half buried under the snow outside. His pulse accelerated. Someone had been tracking them. Every scenario he had imagined in the months prior, the worst-case fears, hadn't done justice to the suffocating certainty that danger was now tangible. Jimin, sensing the tension, leaned slightly closer. "We can handle this," he whispered, and the simplicity of those words belied the complexity of the emotions tangled between them. Jungkook wanted to believe, wanted to let go of the protective walls he had spent years building, but fear was a persistent companion. As they rounded the corner, the wind slammed against the structure like a battering ram. A loud crack echoed through the empty station, metal bending, ice shattering. Jungkook's instincts screamed, but Jimin's hand in his was unrelenting, pulling him forward into the unknown. They entered a dimly lit laboratory, where frost clung to every surface. The air smelled of ozone and cold metal, an electric charge that made their skin prickle. Papers fluttered in the storm's breath, revealing maps, coordinates, and scribbled notes in a handwriting neither recognized. A low hum resonated through the floor, and suddenly, the emergency lights flickered out. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the faint glow of the storm outside, like stars scattered across an endless sea of snow. Jungkook's breath hitched. He could hear his own heartbeat echoing in the confined space, matching the rhythm of Jimin's subtle, measured inhalations. A storm outside, a storm within, both demanding attention, both dangerous. Yet in that frozen moment, neither of them thought about survival. They only thought about the other, about the warmth that defied the surrounding cold, about a connection neither had admitted but both desperately needed. "I won't let go," Jimin murmured against the darkness, and it wasn't just a promise, it was a lifeline. Jungkook's chest tightened, and a rare vulnerability spilled through the cracks of his carefully guarded exterior. "I trust you," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper, the words a confession neither expected but both needed. Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent to their fragile, fleeting warmth. Inside, two hearts beat against the frozen silence, secrets wrapped in snow and courage, Fear and longing entwined in a dangerous, beautiful equilibrium. They didn't know what awaited them beyond the next door, nor how deep the shadow that followed would reach. All they knew was that for the first time in forever, they were entirely, irrevocably bound to each other, to the moment, and to the secrets that winter held in Ushuaia. The wind outside had shifted. It no longer screamed, it whispered. A dangerous, luring whisper that carried the scent of snow and something darker beneath it. Jungkook's hands shook, though he tried to convince himself it was only the cold, but Jimin's fingers were still wrapped around his, grounding him with a touch that burned hotter than any fire. Do you feel that? Jimin's voice was low, nearly swallowed by the hum of the storm. He tilted his head, eyes scanning the frosted corners of the abandoned lab. The way his hair fell over his forehead, the intensity in his gaze, it made Jungkook's pulse stutter. Someone's here. Watching. Jungkook's lips parted, unsure if he wanted to argue or run. We should leave, he said, voice tense. It's not safe. We don't know what we're dealing with. Jimin laughed, but it was a sharp, almost bitter sound. And leave? After coming this far? You've been avoiding me all week, hiding behind that stupid perfectionism of yours. Don't tell me you're scared now. Jungkook's chest tightened. He hated that Jimin could see right through him, could read his fear, his longing, his guilt. I'm not scared, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. I just don't want to risk. You risked it the second we touched hands, Jimin interrupted, stepping closer until the heat of his body pressed against Jungkook's side. His breath was warm on Jungkook's ear, and the effect was immediate, a crackling tension that made him shiver despite the freezing air. Don't lie to me. I know you feel it too. Jungkook swallowed hard, the familiar tug of desire warring with the weight of reality. I can't, he admitted finally, voice trembling. Not like this. Not here. Jimin's eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. Then, with an almost mischievous glint, he said, then maybe you're finally going to have to trust me. And just like that, the air between them ignited. It wasn't just the cold anymore. It was the tension, the unspoken longing, the collision of fear and attraction. Jungkook felt himself leaning into Jimin, into the heat that contradicted the icy surroundings. Their fingers intertwined, and the storm outside seemed to echo the chaos inside them, a violent, unpredictable force neither could ignore. A sudden crash echoed through the station, metal twisting and snow spilling in from a broken window. Both of them froze. Jungkook's instincts screamed for action. Jimin's composure remained unnervingly calm. Stay close, Jimin whispered, voice almost a growl, and Jungkook obeyed, pressing against him as they moved toward the source of the noise. The lab had shelves lined with old research equipment, beakers filled with frozen liquid, papers scattered like confetti from some forgotten experiment. Shadows danced on the walls, distorted by the flickering emergency lights. Jungkook's heart pounded in his ears, but Jimin's presence anchored him, made the fear manageable, even thrilling. Someone's been here before us, Jungkook murmured, brushing his hand over a snow-dusted console. See this? These marks, they're recent. Jimin leaned over, close enough for Jungkook to feel the brush of his breath. Good, he said simply, almost defiantly. Means we're not crazy. Means we're right. The words made Jungkook's chest tighten. Right, but what if right meant danger? What if the person, or people, following them were closer than they thought? The thought made his pulse spike. Then came a sound. A slow, deliberate tapping, echoing from somewhere deeper in the station. Not random, purposeful. Jungkook froze. Jimin's hand tightened around his. Stay behind me, he said softly. No matter what, I've got you. Something shifted in the shadows. A figure emerged, hunched and slow, masked by a hood. The faint glow from the storm caught the glint of their eyes. Both Jungkook and Jimin instinctively stepped closer to one another, the brush of arms and hands sending electricity up Jungkook's spine. Who's there? Jimin's voice was steady, though his body hummed with alertness. The figure paused. For a heartbeat, the world felt suspended, frozen like the ice outside. Then, a low chuckle, gravelly and unnerving, reverberated off the walls. I've been waiting for you too. Jungkook's breath caught. Every scenario he had imagined in the past months, every training, every alertness drill, every warning, flashed before his eyes. Yet none had prepared him for the sharp heat of fear laced with desire, for the way his hand instinctively sought Jimin's in the icy air. Jimin's gaze met his, a silent question. Jungkook nodded imperceptibly. Together, he whispered. The figure stepped closer, and the faint scent of gunmetal and wet snow filled the air. "Do you even know what you're meddling with?" the stranger hissed. "Or do you just enjoy playing with fire?" Jimin's response was immediate, daring, and reckless. "We don't play, we survive," he said, stepping protectively in front of Jungkook. His chest brushed Jungkook's, and Jungkook felt his resolve crumble and rebuild in the same heartbeat. "And if fire's what it takes, then we're burning." A sudden metallic clang sounded behind them. Jungkook spun instinctively, eyes wide, heart hammering. The storm outside had intensified, and the entire station seemed to shudder under its weight. Snow whipped through the broken windows, stinging their skin, chilling them to the bone, yet the heat between them, the friction of proximity, of raw, unspoken emotion, was suffocating. "Don't move," Jimin warned again, eyes darting to the shadow that lingered at the edge of the room. Jungkook's stomach twisted. Every muscle screamed to protect, to run, to hide. And yet, he felt something else, a reckless courage he had never allowed himself before, born entirely of Jimin's unwavering presence. "You're not alone," Jimin whispered, almost into Jungkook's ear, and the words were both shield and temptation. Jungkook's head fell slightly, resting against Jimin's shoulder, and for a fraction of a second, the storm outside, the danger inside, and the unknown figure in the shadows all disappeared. There was only the warmth of their bodies, the synchronized racing of their hearts, and a desire neither dared speak aloud. Then the figure stepped forward again, and the spell broke. Jungkook's hand flew to his side, instinctively checking for any weapon, while Jimin's other hand braced against the wall. Every second stretched impossibly, charged with tension, fear, and something deeper, darker, and more intoxicating than either wanted to admit. "This isn't over," the stranger growled, retreating slightly into the darkness. "Not yet." And in that echoing, frozen chamber, with snow drifting in like ghostly confetti and the wind howling like an angry beast outside, Jungkook and Jimin realized what they shared was more dangerous than the storm, more perilous than any shadow stalking them. Yet neither could or wanted to let go. The night in Ushuaia stretched endlessly around them. Cold, treacherous, yet blindingly intimate. And as they clung together, Jungkook realized something he hadn't admitted even to himself. He would follow Jimin anywhere, even into the heart of a storm that promised death, danger, and desire all at once. The snowstorm outside had grown fiercer, battering the station like a relentless drumbeat, shaking the fragile sense of security Jungkook had been clinging to. Every gust carried sharp ice crystals that cut against their faces, yet inside the cramped lab, the air seemed heavier with the heat and tension between them. Jungkook could feel the friction of their bodies, the subtle brush of Jimin's sleeve against his arm, and it was unbearable, intoxicating, dangerous. "I hate this," Jungkook muttered, voice low, almost a growl, as he paced the narrow corridor. His fingers twitched, wanting to reach out, to grab, to hold, yet unsure whether it was fear or desire that propelled him forward. "Every second here feels like we're exposed. Vulnerable." Jimin leaned casually against the icy wall, though his amber eyes burned with intensity. "Exposed isn't always bad," he said, stepping closer so their shoulders brushed. "Sometimes, it's the only way to feel alive." The brush of their arms was electric. Jungkook swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Alive doesn't mean safe." "Safe doesn't mean anything if we can't be honest," Jimin whispered, leaning so close that Jungkook could feel his breath tickling the shell of his ear. The warmth of Jimin's presence pressed against him in a way that made his skin ache, and he felt a shiver run through him, both from cold and the undeniable tension that simmered between them. "You want me, don't you?" Jungkook's chest tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides, struggling to contain both the fear and desire that tangled like wildfire inside him. "I can't." "Then stop pretending," Jimin interrupted, his voice soft yet firm, impossibly intimate. "You don't get to hide from me. Not here. Not now." The storm outside roared in agreement, or perhaps it was just the universe conspiring to leave them no space to hide. Jungkook's heart raced, his instincts screaming to maintain control, but every rational thought disintegrated when Jimin closed the distance completely. Their shoulders touched, their breaths mingled, and suddenly, there was only the electric tension, the heat radiating from their bodies, the rhythm of two hearts colliding in a room full of shadows. A sudden metallic groan from the far side of the lab shattered the fragile bubble of intimacy. Both of them whipped around. The shadow of the stranger, or someone worse, loomed in the dim light. Jungkook felt his protective instincts surge, but he was also painfully aware that Jimin moved with a fluid confidence he himself could never replicate. "You think you can scare us?" Jimin said, voice low, sharp, dangerous. "We're not running." The figure hesitated, then retreated slightly, only to reappear with an unmistakable gesture, something that sent Jungkook's stomach twisting. A small, folded note fluttered to the floor in front of them, carried by an unseen draft. Jimin bent down, fingers brushing against Jungkook's as he picked it up. The note read, "Secrets have consequences. You're closer than you think. Trust no one." Jungkook's eyes widened. His mind raced. The implications were terrifying, yet thrilling: the unknown, the danger, the possibility that someone had been following them long before they even arrived. "This isn't just a prank," he muttered. "They're watching. Studying us." Jimin's lips curved into a wry, almost dangerous smile. "Then let them watch. Let them see exactly what they can't have." And then, without warning, Jimin stepped so close that Jungkook could feel the heat of his body against his own. His hands moved, almost instinctively, to Jungkook's waist, pulling him flush against him. Jungkook's breath caught, every rational thought scattering. The world outside the lab, the storm, the shadow, the danger, disappeared, leaving only the intensity between them, a magnetic pull that neither could resist. "Do you even realize what you're doing to me?" Jungkook whispered, voice tight, a mixture of warning and confession. Jimin's lips brushed his ear. "I do," he said softly, almost teasingly, "and I love it." The words hit Jungkook like a bolt of lightning, igniting every nerve ending, leaving him raw and exposed. He wanted to fight it, to pull away, but his hands betrayed him, tangling in Jimin's hair, feeling the heat of his skin through the thin layers of clothing. Every touch was incendiary, every glance a promise of things neither dared say aloud. Suddenly, the lab's lights flickered violently, and the shadow appeared again, closer this time, a silent, observing presence. Jungkook's hand tightened on Jimin's arm, grounding himself in the only certainty left, the other's pulse beneath his fingertips, the warmth of skin against skin in a frozen world. "You can't let them control you," Jimin whispered, his forehead resting against Jungkook's temple. "Not them. Not the fear. Not anything. Only us." Jungkook nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that the risk could be fatal. Yet as Jimin's lips brushed his temple, as his hands pressed firmly against Jungkook's back, he realized he didn't care. Not about the danger. Not about the secrets. He only cared about the moment, about the connection that had ignited between them, a bond forged in snow, danger, and desire. Then, a sudden, piercing noise split the air, a gunshot. Or metal snapping under the storm's weight. The station shook violently, sending shards of ice and metal crashing around them. Jungkook instinctively spun, pulling Jimin behind him, both of them pressed together against the cold concrete wall, hearts hammering in unison. "You okay?" Jungkook whispered, breath shaky, hands gripping Jimin's shoulders. "I've never been better," Jimin said, lips grazing Jungkook's, the heat of the brief contact leaving a burn on his skin. "Now stay close. We survive together." In that instant, nothing else mattered. Not the storm outside. Not the shadows. Not the lurking danger. There was only them, two hearts frozen in a world of ice, locked in a dance of fear, longing, and undeniable desire. And somewhere deep within the station, eyes watched. Silent, calculating, waiting for the moment when the frozen hearts might finally shatter. The storm outside had become a white tempest, the snow lashing against the station's skeletal walls, whipping through the broken windows like icy fingers. Inside, the lab felt impossibly small, suffocating with heat and tension that had nothing to do with the weather. Jungkook and Jimin were pressed together near the corner, breaths shallow, eyes wide, every sense heightened by the constant threat of the unknown. "You can't keep hiding like this," Jimin said, voice low, dangerous, brushing his fingertips along Jungkook's jaw. The touch was electrifying, reckless, almost cruel in its intimacy. I see through every lie you tell yourself, every shadow you chase. You want me. You need me. Admit it. Jungkook's chest heaved, the weight of desire and fear battling inside him. We shouldn't. His words were swallowed by the storm's roar, but Jimin's lips pressed against his ear, silencing reason with fire. Shut up and feel, Jimin whispered, voice a mixture of teasing and command, and the heat that followed was almost unbearable. Every brush of Jimin's hand sent shivers through Jungkook, a trembling, delicious tension that made him lose the thread of his own control. He wanted to fight it, to stay rational, but rationality had no place here. Not when Jimin's body pressed into his, not when every glance, every sigh, every subtle move spoke of hunger and need. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into half-shadow, half-glow. Jungkook's eyes darted to the far wall, where movement, or the illusion of it, made him stiffen. Someone's here, he murmured, voice taut with dread. Jimin's hands moved to his shoulders, pulling him flush against himself. Let them watch, he said, dangerously close, lips hovering near Jungkook's. Let them see exactly what they'll never have. Not fear. Not control. Only us. Jungkook's knees weakened. He could feel the pounding of his heart, the flush of his skin, the ache of want he had long suppressed. He wanted to push back the fear, the chaos, the danger, but the temptation was overwhelming. He pressed closer to Jimin, unable to resist the magnetic pull, and in the frozen shadows of Ushuaia, the world narrowed to the heat of two bodies pressed together. A sudden, harsh clang echoed from the upper floor. Both froze, hearts skipping beats. Jimin's hand tightened on Jungkook's arm, grounding him, protecting him, challenging him to trust. Stay with me, he whispered. The words were both command and comfort, a tether through the storm of fear that threatened to engulf them. They moved as one, careful steps crunching on snow and shattered glass. Every corridor, every flickering light, every shadow felt alive with danger. Jungkook's mind raced with worst-case scenarios: an ambush, an intruder, a trap, but all of it faded whenever Jimin brushed against him, whenever his fingers trailed along Jungkook's, a silent promise of intimacy amidst chaos. In a small side chamber, they finally paused. Jimin's body pressed against Jungkook's, foreheads nearly touching, breaths mingling in the icy air. Why are you so afraid? Jimin asked softly, almost vulnerable for a fraction of a second. Of what? Me. The danger. Yourself. Jungkook swallowed hard, eyes flickering with emotion. I'm afraid of losing control, he admitted, voice tight. Of giving in completely and never being able to turn back. Jimin's lips curved into a smirk that was teasing, challenging, and heart-stopping all at once. Then let go, he said, voice low, husky. Let me in. Trust me. I'll catch you. The confession, the invitation, the danger, it all collided into a single, unbearable moment. Jungkook's hands slid along Jimin's sides, tracing the heat beneath the layers of clothing, feeling every curve, every shiver. The storm outside seemed irrelevant. The only storm that mattered was the one raging between them, and yet, as they drew impossibly close, a new sound fractured the fragile intimacy, a whisper, soft but chilling, coming from behind the shadows. You think this is safe? The voice was smooth, commanding, familiar yet foreign, a ghost threading through the icy air. Both froze. Jungkook's body stiffened, every muscle coiled with tension. Jimin's hand found his, gripping it with a possessiveness that was both protective and intimate. Don't look, Jimin hissed, eyes narrowing toward the corner where the shadow lingered. Just stay with me. Jungkook's gaze met Jimin's, and the intensity of that look, fear, desire, trust, defiance, was overwhelming. I'm not leaving you, he said, voice barely audible, trembling with emotion and the heat of longing. Jimin leaned closer, lips brushing against Jungkook's temple, whispering, good. Because I don't plan on letting you go either. The shadow moved again, a silent observer, but the space between Jungkook and Jimin felt impenetrable. Every brush of skin, every whispered word, every lingering touch created a fortress against the cold, against fear, against the unknown. The storm outside could rage as it pleased, but inside, amidst snow and danger and secrets, something irrevocable had ignited. You trust me? Jimin asked, voice low, almost a challenge, almost a plea. Jungkook swallowed hard, chest tight, fingers trembling as they laced with Jimin's. Completely, he admitted, voice breaking slightly. I trust you with everything. Jimin's lips grazed his ear. Good. Because nothing else matters. Not the shadows, not the storm, not the past. Only this. Only us. And in that frozen, snow-swept corner of Ushuaia, as the storm rattled the station and shadows danced in the flickering lights, Jungkook and Jimin let themselves feel it all: fear, longing, desire, and the exhilarating danger of giving in completely. The world outside could wait. Here, in the heart of the storm, nothing else existed but their heat, their touch, their secret. And neither would let go, not now, not ever. The storm had finally begun to relent, the furious winds fading into a quiet, cold stillness. The first pale light of dawn filtered through the shattered windows of the station, casting long, fragile shadows over the frost-lined floor. Every surface glittered with ice, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Jungkook sat on the edge of a broken table, shoulders slumped, exhausted, every muscle aching from the adrenaline and the tension of the night. Jimin knelt beside him, hands brushing lightly over his forearms, grounding him with a touch that had carried both danger and comfort through hours of uncertainty. Neither spoke immediately, words felt unnecessary. They had survived, yes, but more importantly, they had found each other in the midst of chaos. Finally, Jungkook lifted his eyes to meet Jimin's. His amber gaze, usually so guarded, now reflected raw vulnerability. I thought I'd lose myself tonight, he admitted, voice trembling. Not to them, but to everything. To this. Jimin smiled softly, a faint, knowing curve of his lips that sent warmth rushing through Jungkook's chest. And yet you didn't, he said. You didn't lose yourself because you didn't have to. You had me. And I had you. That's what matters. Jungkook exhaled, tension spilling out of him like melted snow. He reached for Jimin's hand, holding it in both of his. The storm outside might have been over, but the storm between them, the desire, the closeness, the unspoken confessions, was still very much alive. And for the first time, he let himself surrender to it without hesitation, without fear. I trust you, he whispered, voice low, thick with emotion. Completely. You already do, Jimin replied, leaning forward to press his forehead against Jungkook's. And I'll never let you regret it. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the frozen landscape. Snow sparkled like diamonds across the mountains, the icy cliffs, the fragile remnants of the station. Outside, the world was cold and unforgiving, yet inside, in this fragile bubble they had carved for themselves, there was warmth, safety, and something far more enduring than either had expected. Jungkook drew Jimin closer, wrapping his arms around him, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the rhythm of their hearts. Every fear, every shadow, every threat had melted away, leaving only this intense, fragile, beautiful. You make me feel alive, Jungkook admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, almost lost to the light wind brushing through the broken panes. Jimin's lips brushed his temple, a gentle, lingering touch. Then never forget it, he murmured. Because we survived tonight. And whatever comes next, we face it together. Jungkook nodded, pressing his forehead to Jimin's, eyes closed, letting himself finally breathe, finally feel. The snow outside continued to glisten, the silence between storms settling into a quiet, enduring peace. They had faced shadows, secrets, and danger, and they had survived. Not just physically, but together, hearts entwined, trust and longing solidified in the frozen wilderness of Ushuaia. And as the first rays of sunlight touched their faces, Jungkook and Jimin stood side by side, knowing that whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them as one. Their hearts were no longer frozen. They had thawed, ignited, and finally, irrevocably intertwined.